Well, hi, everybody across the globe. This is Heather Lockett with Lasting Conversations, and I have a spectacular ball of light with us today. And her name is Yulia Konovnitsyna, and she has warned me that it's okay to kind of stumble through all those extra vowels because her name, Yulia, literally means light from her country of origin. So, hi, Yulia, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Heather. It's nice to be here.
It's so beautiful to have you here. Now, the two of us met years ago at this really great group called Creative Mornings Palm Beach. Mm-hmm. And Yulia is one of the founding members of that particular group. And Creative Mornings is all about community, which you know here on Lasting Conversations, we are nothing but love and community and joy and bringing people together. So we're going to talk about that. Yulia also is a founder of her own beautiful business called Straightforward Digital Marketing Company. And she has a new love offering these days having to do with you should read gifting. So we're going to talk about some beautiful things. Yulia has a very interesting origin story from where she's come from. And part of another thing that's a bit of a kismet between us is I'm a bit of a nomad. You know, I've done some road trips, but Yulia is the queen master of van life. She spent the better part of 5 years on the road with her beautiful dog, exploring the countryside and exploring herself, exploring the world. So we have so many beautiful roads to take in this conversation. Welcome again, Yulia.
Thank you so much. That was beautifully summarized, and it doesn't even feel like my life, but I'm so excited to share bits and pieces today on the show.
Great. So should we start? Should we start with Creative Mornings or the end? Maybe that is that sense of community, because before we started recording, and I was asking where you're originally from, maybe we should start from that origin point and what community actually means to you.
Oh, that's such a great question. So for me, community and myself are so intertwined that it's really hard to see myself as a solo entity. I mean, obviously, I love my sovereignty, but from early on, I've always shared energies with other people, and that's kind of become a thing that I gravitate towards and seek in this world. And the origin of that is I am the oldest sister. I have 2 biological siblings and 2 that were, brought into my family over the years in a beautiful, serendipitous way. I grew up in a culture that was still kind of a multi-generational in an old school way. You know, my grandparents raised me. My grandma was like my pillar. I also grew up in the wilderness. I mean, we spent our summers out in the countryside and we would go camping. And one of my favorite activities growing up was like mushroom picking and berry picking. We helped my grandma with her garden. So, as a young child, I was always very connected to the earth and surrounded by people of all kinds of backgrounds, a lot older than me sometimes. And I just was such a sponge for all of that. I wanted to constantly learn and connect and hear the stories. And that really has shaped my life from very early years. And to skip forward through where that led me is when my family immigrated to America and we settled in here.
And where were you originally from? I hear your beautiful accent. And so where are you originally from?
Oh, my accent is extra profound because I'm nervous, by the way. But I was born in Yekaterinburg, Russia, which the best way on the map to visualize it is the Ural Mountains is like the imaginary border between Europe and Asia. And that's if there was a dot on the map, that would be like where I'm from. And it's kind of an interesting place. It's right in the middle of nowhere. It's a big city, but we lived on the outskirts. And, I grew up very earthy, but because of where we were, I got to travel the entire country in both directions by trains. So my nomadic journey probably began when I was 6, 7, taking this long 3-4 day trips via trains all across Russia.
Beautiful, beautiful. And tell us more about that. And then you were about to fast forward into when you came to this country.
Yeah, so I kind of just want to wrap up the definition of community
Yes.
where that fits into my life.
Right.
When I moved here and I started to, I got through school, and I started my own little journey working, building myself in, in a corporate sector. That was something that just felt like missing. There was, I feel like in the Western culture there's a little bit of a disconnection that exists. It's just not normal, or almost like acceptable to be vulnerable in the spaces that we all inhibit.
Right.
Like, we show up to work, but you're just so polite and cordial. You ask how are you, but oh, god forbid you tell somebody how you really feel, right? And so there was
Right.
always like this sense of like disconnection, and I constantly looked for other ways. And so that's how Creative Mornings found me. Is I started to do some freelancing work, and I was trying to figure out how to build that into something that I could do full time. And through divine guidance, I found my way to a Creative Mornings chapter in Fort Lauderdale. I saw it on Instagram actually, and that was like love at first sight. I walked in there and I was like, wow, this is like a family I didn't know like I had. And then from there on, it led me to co-founding a chapter in Palm Beach, which is you're a part of, with
Mhm.
14 beautiful humans that are all creative and wonderful in their, creative paths. And yeah, I got to actually meet the global community, because when you join and start a chapter locally, you're also invited into the global platform of Creative Mornings, which is where all 200 plus countries, share space. And I got to go to two global summits with Creative Mornings, which are like sleepaway camps for adults, which is, again, takes back to my origin story. When I used to be a little girl, one of my favorite things is my parents, who were very busy and very young and had three children, they would just ship me off on the train across the country to a remote area. There's this big lake, the biggest lake in the world. It's called Baikal, and it's in like the eastern part of Russia. And I would just take the train for 3 days, get there, and I would spend 20 to 30 days every summer backpacking, camping. And my uncle happened to be a tour guide, or like a retreat person. I don't even know what to call him. And he was the one who like took me under his wings, and I got to spend that time, my summers, with these groups, just exploring nature, exploring community, sharing stories, and play, like the pure, like free sense of play.
And play. That's so beautiful. And so, threading back to Creative Mornings, which is a global community, a woman in Brooklyn birthed this idea of how to bring people together. And literally, as you were talking about, because within corporate structures, something's missing, right?
Yeah.
Something is just missing, and it doesn't resonate on that human level. And so she created, where part of their mantra is everyone is creative. You can be an accountant and a lawyer and a doctor. We're all creative beings. And so from that, that started with just a few people getting together, now has over 200 chapters across the globe for people such as us, and so many that want that time together once a month, and it's free. It just, it's so beautiful. It becomes almost wordless, but that you've been to two of their global summits is so fun. And I think I saw you soon after you went to one of the last ones. And it is like a big adult summer camp where you just play and love and share and create and mastermind and more, right?
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I think that to your point, one of the biggest disservices of our modern times is that we grow up and we just stay kind of in that formal kind of rigid space where we don't get to really reconnect with like our inner child that still lives within us. And for me, I'm lucky. I call myself lucky. My inner child felt so repressed for years when I denied her that experience, that playtime. And for a really long time, I fought her. I was like, no, I gotta adult. I got to, move up the career ladder. I have to achieve. I have to do this. And I believed like the formal path, like the getting your ducks in a row. But like, who said ducks have to be in a row? Like, who came up with that, right? That doesn't make any sense. Like, look at nature. Do you ever see ducks in a row? Unless they're crossing the road. But it's, for me, it's been one of the biggest things. Creative Mornings was one of the first experiences that I found in my adulthood that took me back to the things that meant the most to me in my childhood. And it became like a bridge between like who I thought I was and who I really earned to be, but I didn't know if there was a pathway to get there. So for me, Creative Mornings has changed my life quite literally, and has connected me with the most wonderful people like yourself.
Yes, and yes, and yes. So, so amazing. So anybody that's listening, just check out Creative Mornings. It is global. And this is the other part that I love is this is meant to be a global show. We are all one in this world. And so I love seeing the photos from Pakistan and from Turkey and from all the places around the world in Asia, and that people are coming together on a morning, and they are sharing these themes. And each month there is a theme, whether it's love or fear or pathos or you name it. There are all these themes.
Ritual in August.
Ritual, that's right, ritual. And they're just enjoying each other. They're learning something new. Everybody that comes in, it's not your typical, and here is a presenter and you're getting talked at. There's breath of life within each month and within each group that you learn something new. And my 40th visit, I happened to be in Burlington, Vermont a couple of months ago, and they have an adorable group, and their focus is with artists and artistry and creative passions that way. And so every chapter has their own feel, their own sense of family. And yet here we're doing this one thing, many places and many houses. It's the core essence. Whoever, I will get to meet this woman at one point because she's literally speaking my love languages.
Yeah. Tina is amazing. That's the thing. She's built this thing, but she's so humbled by it, and I think that's like the leaders we need most in the world are the ones who have, like, they channel something, from this like other universe where ideas live. They channel that into the world and they give it as a gift, and then they just like gently let it go. They release it, and then it becomes this gorgeous movement. And I've got to meet Tina twice, briefly. I don't have like I didn't have a deep relationship with her, but just in those moments you could feel her humanity and her beautiful like tenderness and love for the community that she's not only created but is a part of. And just the intention behind it, that selflessness, that like wholeheartedness, those are some of the most beautiful energies that I gravitate to. So I feel like everybody in the Creative Mornings, that energy brings other like-minded people, and that's why we keep showing up, we keep learning, we keep connecting, we keep supporting. And I think everybody should go and check it out in their own city.
I think so too. And you just literally said a mouthful in talking about leadership and what is where I start to call business unusual, that we can come from spaces that are bigger than us, from divine sources without even sounding woo. This is the nuts and bolts of nature and who we are as humans, and that it's a different way of communicating, of being together. And then we'll start talking about your own businesses, which a lot of me wants to say beingnesses, right? So you can conduct business, but it's how we're being within that. And what you were just talking about, it comes through us from a bigger space. And so from here, Yulia, where has your journey led? So I know you started with your straightforward digital marketing, and then van life called, and then a whole nother iteration has called you. So tell us a little bit more about your beautiful path. Yeah. Because you're part of our new leadership. I think I needed to blurt out and say that too. So for my generation, we're sort of halfway in between old school, damn glad to meet you and chambers of commerces and all of that structure into you all are the new leaders, and we get to play in your playground as well. But the way showers of saying, we're not playing in the same way anymore. We're not playing politically. We're not playing educationally. We're not playing business and corporate. We have a whole different way of being together and conducting all our businesses and educations and everything. But come over here, try it over this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have such hope, and I'm seeing it happening everywhere.
Right.
There is like a desire, a collective conscious desire to shift things. Like the systems we've had for so long are not working, and nobody's happy. Truly, like at the core essence, everybody carries that weight on their own and they hide it and they're so pressured by it. I feel like the next chapter, the next generation, it's all about like heart connection. And I know your podcast is all about hearts, that's what really strikes me is like you are also a pioneer in this. We need more people. We have this, I read this somewhere and I don't remember where, but we have enough intelligent people in this world. We don't need more intelligent people. We need more emotionally intelligent people, like driven by their heart, people who are conscious and tapped into their, being awake and connected to their inner self and have that relationship with themselves, that they come from a place of love and they're able to channel that into the world, which opens doors for other people to also, discover that within themselves. And then if we all start to move into that direction, it will be a completely different world. So I am very hopeful these days. And hope drives a lot of the things that I do, because the other side of it is very scary, losing that hope and grieving, what isn't is also, it's heavy. So I don't want to live in that energy.
Well, true. And so I know sometimes we've talked with others on the show about finding these states that you're talking about and knowing in our core, life is good. People are inherently good. It may not show up. The movie screen of the cast of characters can really be horrible. And some of our experiences can literally be scary and hurtful, et cetera. But how we then negotiate and work through them. And so what we've talked about is not creating a bliss Band-Aid, but a little bit of a bubble. We can say, this is where I choose to be and who I'm with and what is nourishing and who is nourishing, and make some serious changes because of that, all the while not going, we don't Om Shanti ourselves to death, right? Pretending that our arm was cut off or something like that. So I think you're a beautiful soul that knows how to blend these things, be a nourishing space, acknowledging this is really hard right now also. And you had mentioned yesterday about the grieving into potentials, right? There's the spaces where you have to dig deep and then move forward.
Wow, you said it so beautifully. I almost want to just nurture myself with your words, because okay. So let's dive into this, because I don't believe that we can ever get there to a space of harmony within ourselves if we reject pain, suffering, grief, and all the negative emotions that society views as inconvenience, embarrassing, shameful. I don't want to see your suffering. I don't want to see your pain. Show up with a smile on your face, right? My boss in my first corporate job, I'll never forget, he used to tell me, leave your emotions at the door. And I understand why that worked in the workplace. I understand.
Sure.
But there were days where you can't just zip yourself up in armor and show up and pretend you're here and you're we're feeling with every cell of our body. And so I totally resonate with what you're saying, and I live by that, which is such a prerequisite for where my story took me. It was that repressed, trying to live up to that facade, that masquerade that we all put on, that is generally acceptable to zip up all of that, bottle all that up, and not share with anybody, but on the inside you're just crumbling. And I did that all the way into my late 20s until I had no choice, but it broke me completely. My I celebrate my Saturn return at 28. It was a beautiful experience that kind of started it. It was 2 years after starting Creative Mornings. I had messages come in that year from like this little interactions that I was having with people, and I found my way into a Vipassana meditation course, which is one of the most ancient meditation techniques. It was actually developed by Gautama Buddha himself. And the meditation has taught me that there's only two things in the world that cause all the misery. And it's so simple. It's one is craving and one is aversion. And that was the beginning where I started to realize, oh, it's actually not that complicated. We don't need to have answers. We don't need to like constantly seek and search. We just need to be with what is in the present moment and every moment in time. And that started a process of healing for me. So I was 28 years old. I learned this technique that was beautiful. And then life, ironically, took me on a journey where I actually needed those tools, because at the age of 29, turning 30, I had a back-to-back losses. Like it was like the dark night of the soul. Everything crumbled in that year. I was in a relationship that I thought was going to be the one person that I was going to commit to. And that ended in a saddest way on my 30th birthday, in a very like hurtful way, where my divine feminine was rejected. And I felt wounded from that. And then, but also it wasn't actually that, it was the fact that I didn't have a relationship with my divine feminine. On top of that, I lost somebody in my circle who was almost like a sister to me, to cancer, and she was 33. And that was just, it like blew the everything like up from the surface. You couldn't contain it anymore. And so the only thing I knew is, on the surface, everything looked calm and put together and collected. Everybody was like, oh, look at you, you're killing it with your straightforward business. You know, I was running, had so many clients. I was like living the life. I was deeply connected in a community. I was the host of Creative Mornings. Like a lot of people looked at me and they were like, you have it all together. But behind the scenes, I was just falling apart. And so the only thing I knew is that none of this could stay the same. And so at the end of that year, my 30th year on this planet, I made an intention that I was just going to leave Florida. This was my home base for 17 years. I was just going to get in my car and drive to California and find my way through from there. I didn't know where I was going, why I was going, but I had this really, really vivid knowing that was going to heal me somehow, or guide me somehow. And I trusted it. And so little by little, I just started to prep for it. And that's how the nomadic journey happened. And the next thing you know, it took me on a roller coaster for the next 5 years, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Well, you know, I love everything you're saying. Is like the river is flowing. It's just so beautiful, and so many beautiful nuggets along the way. And what I'm sure you didn't know, because we all know about vision boards and things, when you had this inner knowing, I'm just going to go, right? I'm just going to
vision board.
That's your vision board. And vision board,
Yeah,
I do love vision boards. And then, but I have a feeling, and I'll put it as a question, when you initially got in the car, did you know it was going to be, I'm going to be gone for 5 years or not?
No,
exactly.
no.
That's what I mean. So our visions, we have visions to help us expand, and then the rest continues to unfold. Right. And I mean, I mentioned on a different show with the gentleman of the back nine, we were talking about dating, and I've been long divorced for now basically 12 years, uncoupled. I had no idea. If you had told me 12 years ago that you wouldn't be in another relationship yet, I probably would have broken and fallen apart worse than I was at that time. But here it is. We go through our rivers as we need to then come to the next place. And then we're ready for the next place. Right.
Yeah. And I can relate to that so much, because if you would have asked me at the beginning of that year, 2019, if I would do this for a long time, I would have probably said, no, I'm just gonna,
Right.
6 months. Give me 6 months.
I'll give it
But the
6
thing is
months. Yeah.
that, that river that you mentioned, it takes you. And I think the number one thing is we have to surrender to the
Yeah.
experiences that come at us, listen to the signs, trust them. And we don't need to know. We don't need to actually have any answers.
Right.
You commit yourself to something and the river takes you there. You don't have to fight it. The minute you start fighting is when that suffering comes back. So that's been really true for me in this experience.
It's so true. You're preaching, sister. I get it. 100%. So do you want to hop into, so from your van life and all those amazing adventures, and your Instagram has, the photos, I was living vicariously, of course, because I might do a road trip. But I didn't come from camper life and literally being out into the elements and, in the deserts, and you had nobody around you. And so it was you and source and nature. It's extraordinary. And I always hats off and props to you for doing that.
Thank you.
From all of this. And then you would tap back and you were alone. And then you found community and you created, there were other relationships and many adventures. And then you would tap back to Florida and get refreshed, or you went from a car to a van and you built that out. So there were so many stops along the way that brought you to home base, which we all need a home base. We just do. Van, nomad life is great, but I don't know about you, but I like to know where my nest is, right? It's great to come home and be maybe with our previous life folks, right? Our families and friends and all of that. So now I'm sensing a little bird. So tell us about how all of these things have now kind of intertwined into the next vision for you that has become your you should read box, their giftings, and which is also morphing. And I know that part of that is that you're part of business and mastermind communities that are helping you flourish and bloom this life force that is the next thing.
Yeah. And again, maybe not, but you never know. Right. I'm just trusting. But I love your question because and
I'm going to just say that because we never know. Like, again, there are plans and then there's but have you considered this? So I love that you just said that. Right.
You follow the calling. And that's how it always been for me. When I hit the road, I don't know if you're familiar. It's one of my favorite books of all time is called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And it's if you haven't read it, or if somebody on this podcast who's listening have not read it, I recommend you go read it. You can read it in 4 hours. It's such a short book, but it's a fiction book, but the narrative, it's like the ultimate hero's journey. And I feel like I've had many chapters of my own versions of a hero's journey. And it's, it's coming from a place of conflict within. At that year when I had all that loss, I couldn't stay. I couldn't just remain in the shell, right? So I had to go seek something, find something. The universe was calling, so I trusted it. So the van life journey, it wasn't van life yet. I had my RAV4 and I just decided to drive that. And I had some Airbnbs booked along the way. And it was crazy because in The Alchemist, when you go into this journey, you're going to have obstacles come up. All these things are going to come up and interfere. So on my first night, my sister came with me and we stayed at an Airbnb, and the next morning we went to get breakfast at Whole Foods of all places. And when we came out, my entire car was just damaged side to side. And I was like, oh my God. And then I saw a woman standing outside with her driver's license. We were in Whole Foods for an hour. And this woman said she's been waiting for 30 minutes because she accidentally crashed into my car and damaged it. And she wanted to make sure that she was there so she had integrity to help me solve this. And I was like, wow, like, should I just drive back and take care of this? But the car was still drivable. So I decided I'm just going to take her information, file with my insurance and keep going. 3 days later in Austin, Texas, my sister and I left the car on on a parking spot and went to explore. When we came back, my car was broken into, and my laptop and my backpack with my laptop was stolen. My work was all on there, and I immediately thought, is this a sign? Is this a sign for me to turn around and go back home where I came from? But I just trusted the journey so much. And I said, okay, it's okay. Windows can be fixed. Next thing you know, I called somebody, they took care of it. And then it was day 6, and I got a call from my brother, and he said, you need to call mom now. And I said, oh God, what happened now? You have that gut feeling. And so I called my mom, and she told me my grandma in Russia has passed away suddenly, completely mysteriously. And I said to myself, okay, that's it. It's time to turn around, because there's no way I can just let my mom handle that on her own. And there's no way I can just selfishly pursue this quest of mine when so much is happening, and there's obviously a need for me to turn around. And I'm like exactly halfway through the country. But here's the thing, that night I had a dream, and in my dream a little voice messenger said, go to Sedona. And I was like, I woke up in the morning and I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to go to Sedona and see what happens. And I go to Sedona, and next thing you know, a friend of mine sees me check in there and says, you need to reach out to this person who is like this spiritual guide, how the hero's journey has a mentor. And this person happens to be available the next morning and takes me on this hike that is on top of a vortex called Bell Rock. And I get to sit and I get to make peace with all of that pain that I felt taking on this big, undertaking in my journey. And that was like the first moment I realized, like, I am living the story of the alchemist. I am trusting that all these forces are teaching me something. They're lessons that I haven't learned yet. They're lessons of how to make peace with grief, how to feel it all fully, how to not attach to any of it, how to still have empathy and compassion, even if I'm feeling so much, and to really just trust the journey. Because the main theme of The Alchemist was, when you really, truly want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it. And that really stuck with me. And so, fast forward to the end of that year on the road, I knew intrinsically that the car life, I got a rooftop tent. I did that for a while. The car life was getting old. I was, again, feeling very like, how like the lobster, it outlives its shell. It needs to come out of the shell. And when you come out of the shell, you're so vulnerable. The change is hard. You have to like lay under the rock and let a new shell grow around you. And it takes time. And so I remember, like, I knew that the car life was not serving me and my puppy anymore, and we needed something bigger. But it was such a big decision to get a van. I also had no skills. How am I going to build this? How am I going to turn this into a house? But this is what happens. You have an intention, you trust that you will find a way, and you just put that into the world and you call that in, and all of this messengers and all of this people start to come in, and somebody has this tip and somebody has this thing that they can help you. And that's exactly how my journey has led me to where I am today. After building my van and spending some time traveling, both with my partner at the time and solo, I came into a new roadblock. I was really living the dream life, but now I again missed the sense of belonging that you have with the community. So Florida has always been like my home base, but it's not the place that pulls me. It's people are my roots. I don't really believe in like a place being a root. And so, eventually after 5 years of roaming, I needed a change. I loved the people I met. I loved the transient form of community, how it would ebb and flow through my life. And every experience was so meaningful, because you never know if you're going to see these people again. Every campfire, every hike that we shared was so precious, because it was like in this present moment, that's all you might ever get with this energies together. And so eventually the road said, you needed to rest. You needed to rest. You need to take a break, and you needed to go figure out why you feel so creatively burnt out from just kind of living the marketing consulting that I was doing for so many years on the road. I did it on the road remotely. It was filling my cup until it wasn't. It became kind of something that I did, not something that I really was like passionate about. And so the journey brought me to Florida, because my community is here, because I have a sense of belonging here, because I have a tribe of people who I truly believe in and I love their work and their creativity, and I trust them. So it just made sense, of all the beautiful places I've been, to just drive home and spend a little chapter here. So I'm still in the middle of writing the story. I don't know where this is going, how long I'm going to be here for, but I'm trusting it again, like I've always have.
Wow. And wow again. And another piece to the van life is that you were very honest about sharing. This is not all bells and whistles every day. This can be very hard. And that, yes, you were having adventures, and most of those were the beautiful photos that you shared. But then you were saying, I actually work an 8-hour day or more. You were literally working and living at the same time. And so, and it's expensive. I remember that very well, as I was thinking, oh, do I just sell my house and get in a van myself? No, you were very practical to say, understand these have costs and financial costs involved as well. So you were very practical within this adventure. So I always appreciated that within the storyline as well, because I think a lot of us can go into something is calling us, but where has that become a fantasy? Versus, these are some practicalities as well. But to be ready for those. And sometimes we do. I will call it investing in myself. So maybe last year was very expensive with the things, the places and the people I was meant to stay in and be with. That was an investment year. Right. And so that we get to step out of that shell that you were just talking about, something is different. Something isn't quite right anymore. You can't even put your finger on it, but let's shift perspective. So if it's a location, sometimes that does help. And just to shift a perspective of maybe I'm going to do it a different way. And kind of a segue to that, it can be something very simple. I know I've mentioned before, for people to try a new diner, go to a different restaurant, or go do something outside of your usual routine and comfort zone. And then within our house, move a chair from one place to the next, just something to shift an energy or look somewhere differently. And it can be very magical, actually. And it also can help bring up the stuff, those feelings, whatever is stagnant is meant to come up and show us what we need to learn. So you're so on target with that whole hero's journey version of our lives, right? Where things can present to show us, is this my block? Is this where I'm meant to stop? Or is this now the bigger invitation to keep on going to get to the next thing that maybe you didn't expect?
Yeah, I love everything you just said, because I think, again, to strip it down to the basics, you don't need a giant leap of faith to get started. You just need to make one little step. And that could be getting into your own car and driving out for the weekend to spend it in nature. You could get a cabin in the woods. I know you probably experience, I call it windshield therapy, that freedom of sitting behind the wheel and driving through the beautiful rural landscape outside of the metropolitan areas. And the energy that you feel within your body, it is so liberating. It's like a hell yes every single time. It's like I feel so alive, because I don't know where I might have a destination, but I don't know what the road entails. I don't know what will come at me, what kind of adventures I might stumble into, both challenging and very light. But it's always so worth it, because those moments behind the wheel, that pure freedom that is felt through ourselves, it's intoxicating.
No, you're making me, you're not making me cry. That is such joy to me. And I've called it driving meditation, but I remember my first just get in the car and go. And then I looked in the mirror and I realized I'm smiling, like the dogs that are hanging out the window. Yeah, there's something to it. And so and driving can get very exhausting, and then it's time to go home. But what you're just speaking, my harmony, there's something about that vista of an open road and the places that aren't, and the places and possibilities, and music and a local radio station and whatever else, Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
but you do need balance. I'm with you. It only I knew I call them thresholds, when you're ready for to face change. It's those moments are so visceral. Something is working and you're so in a state of flow with it. And then there's something that like pings at your heart and says, it's time to pivot, right? It's like this energy that you feel.
Right,
And so that coming home, whatever that, whatever, in whatever capacity, in whatever part of life that is, that coming home, whether that's literally coming to a physical location or taking a break or just taking a couple days to reflect and go within, if we're tuned in and we're, are listening, we are making space to like feel what that calling is, we can take that time for ourselves. And that's always like those moments that give us clarity. And
right.
then you don't need to be planning and like projecting into like, what am I supposed to do next? You just have this very like solid inner knowing. At least it's true for me. I call it my intuition, but it has many names for everybody. It's spelled differently, but I think we can all relate that the moments when you feel kind of stuck, you feel it. And if you just listen, you'll have
Right.
your answers. And so, I totally relate. The road is healing for that in that
Yeah.
aspect, because sometimes just taking a 4 or 5 hour drive through a beautiful scenery, it gives you some of that. It gives you time to reflect, because when else are you so quiet and you're monotasking, just eyes on the road, which, outside the country, in the countryside, it's pretty passive to drive on a 2 lane, highway.
Yeah.
And so you're just roaming, and now you have all that time to reflect. And I think that that's what I miss most right now, living in this new chapter. I sometimes just go and drive somewhere in my van, which I still have, just so I
Mhm.
can reconnect with that part of my reality, that little gift.
It's so, so true. And a good friend of mine, that's how she feels on a motorcycle. Where
Mm,
and because, and this is a businesswoman, she's got a many plates spinning in the air. She has said, because on a motorcycle, you have to be extra present
yeah.
because it's life and death. You have to be very in a now moment, all the while you're the wind in your hair and all of that experience. And then for her, it helps her really focus, to be very present. And I get
Yeah.
people on a boat. It's the same thing. Boaters boat, right? They just go out on
Bicycle,
that and
cross country bike.
bicycle, all of it,
Yeah.
all of that, those things that feed us so, so, so beautifully. Um, and whether there's silence, many times people say, well, have you listened to books on tape or whatever? And obviously on a road trip, podcasts are great, like lasting conversations.
Yeah.
However, I will marvel that hours will go by. I have nothing. I don't
Yeah.
play anybody else's music. I'm just hearing myself or what comes through and
Hmm.
being in that kind of observance. And I think that might be a good tag into where we're really coming home to ourselves. It could be about
Hmm.
location and people and places, but really, oh, this is home to myself. And now what am I hearing and what is calling?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a powerful feeling, because the only home we truly have, that's why I don't say home is a physical place. For me, it's
Right.
like that sense of belonging, this like little invisible strings that I feel towards other people, my core tribe. But home is within me. It's
Right.
no doubt about it. That's the only place I ever felt, fully
Right.
like safe. Home is it's like a safe space, and it's honestly, I just had this conversation with my partner who's writing a book for the nomadic community, and he's exploring the theme of what does home mean to somebody who is a nomad, and he's interviewed over 120 people, and one of the themes that emerged is home is within. It's
Yeah.
something that is deeply viscerally felt, but to tap into that, you do need to have some intentional rituals and tools that you tap into that. Because if you're constantly just making yourself busy running
Right.
around in a crazy world and you're not
Right.
connected, you don't even have time. Those people who say, oh, I don't have time to meditate, these are the people who need to make time. Start with like 2 minutes. 2 minutes is
Yeah.
enough to get you grounded, get your breath regulated, to be like, oh,
Right.
I'm breathing today, I can feel my lungs expanding. These are the people who need it most, right? So I hear you, but it's something that it takes effort to intentionally tap into that energy.
It absolutely does. And that, yes, there's a difference between running around and running away versus moving toward, right? And to kind of look in and check with yourself to say, am I running away from something? And sometimes you do, if you're in a bad, dangerous place or relationship, you got to go. But the difference, I think some people have a misperception of people who are nomads. They're running away from everything. No, they're coming within and creating something different. If I'll put that as a question, are you finding that as well? That most of the people along the road that you find, are they, this thing about wanderlust or wandering isn't aimless necessarily.
Yeah.
It's literally about that homecoming.
Yeah, I would say that it's interesting because in my own experience, I can relate to running away. I had to run away to come home. It's both. It's like,
and I've done that too. You absolutely have to. Yeah.
You have to be lost sometimes in order to explore and like find your, like trust your curiosity, and it will lead you to answers. You have to get lost a little bit sometimes. There's funness to being a little lost, right? But I do find that in the nomadic community overall, in my experience of the hundreds of people I met along the journey, there's like this beautiful moment where you start to realize you're no longer running away. You're just integrating all of these experiences and through reflection, through this long solitude, those times where you spend with nature, seeing the change, and you realize like our lives is nothing but change. It's constantly, nothing is static. Everything is moving. Things are constantly ebbing and flowing. And therefore there's no need to attach to anything. And therefore you're not running away anymore. You're just present to what is. And I think a lot of people, it's easier when you're nomadic, when you're constantly changing settings and you are more present to that change. When you're living in a very structured, routine-oriented environment where you wake up the same time every day, go to work at the same time to the same place every day, it's harder to see that time, that like frequency of, constantly changing and flowing and moving. And I think that's unfortunately, our world is structured in a way that a lot of people are burdened by that, that stability that they need, but it also takes away from that ability to really have a deeper, knowing within themselves, to really trust themselves, because you don't make space for that anymore when you're just kind of, when you're self-protected and stuck. Nothing profound happens in a comfort zone, right? We have to go on the edges, peek out and see what's out there. And then you start to step over, and that's where growth happens.
Yes and yes again. And I think this is a beautiful segue into your latest business creation, which is You Should Read boxes. And because there are a lot of people that in their certain seasons and chapters, they might have to do some 9 to 5, or, they're raising families. Things have to have a schedule, and that's okay. But here is something that you have created, some rituals and some self-soothing and nurturing, and something, we learn something new every day. So tell us about the morphing into your new gifting that you're offering to the world, because I think that helps people. I think that helps people, especially, yes, you might have already stepped out in maybe nomadic style, but I'm guessing that especially for those still in their moments, in their little constructs, these are some amazing gifts for businesses, for families, for the individual.
Yeah. Oh, Heather, thanks for asking it in from this angle, because so I didn't start You Should Read because I wanted to. I started because I had no choice. It haunted me for years. I mean, this idea lived with me since I started my agency. And I am somebody who grew up in a culture that was very, in a background that was very poor. We didn't have much, and there was like no abundance of things. But what we had plenty of was books and, the connections that we all share. So I read a lot as a child. My grandma used to be the one who would buy me these really fascinating books that would be like self-reflection. Some of them were numerology, some taught me journaling. And so as a 6, 7-year-old, I remember like how fascinated I was living in my little world, which partially had a lot of dysfunction from my cultural background. Russia is an interesting place to grow up, especially, post-Soviet. There's like the darkness that people live with from, broken hearts, really is what I think. But not to get too, sidetracked by that, my grandma instilled the love of reading and exploration into me when I was very young. And then when I moved to the United States, I didn't speak a word of English, when I was 13, and it was really hard to relate to people and have conversations. So I always had books on my nightstand. I always came back, and I actually improved my language by reading, English was one of my favorite classes, but it also terrified me because they made us read out loud. So, it was scary, but also it pushed me to keep trying, to keep learning, and really like understanding deeper, not just what I'm reading, but like the stories and the personalities of these people. And so books have been my teachers. I've learned tips and tools that I didn't have adults in my own household teaching me. And so I very early on knew like books were amazing, like gold mine of information. And so as I got older and I started my business, one of the things I wanted to do is you have to give gifts when you have a client-centric business. And I always wanted my gifts to be intentional. So I would gift a lot of books. I remember when I still worked with corporate, I had a team of 7 people that I managed in my marketing department. And I think they were so annoyed because every holiday, every birthday, I would just give them books. And sometimes I see that they wouldn't read them. They would just have them on the desk. So I would give them an audiobook version when back in the days where you can send a credit to somebody to buy, and I feel like I still have the login. Some of those credits were never redeemed. People never downloaded it, but I didn't care. The thing is that the intention is there. When give a book gifted with intention, because you really believe in the message of it to somebody you really care about, they might not be ready for it in that moment, but if they have it one day, I truly believe that, the universe will find a way for them to pick it up and read it and in the exact moment that they need it. So it kind of started from that, and I, as I built my agency and I was doing consulting and I had a team, I would gift books all the time, but it was so cumbersome to gift books. So one of the wish items I had is, why isn't there a service that lets me create an experience of gifting a book? And I ended up thinking that before I left on the road. I didn't start it. And as I spent 5 years roaming around everywhere, still didn't happen. It still didn't exist. And now it got harder for me to do gifting because now I wasn't even in Florida. I still had most of my clients there. And I would have to like ship things. I would have to go buy books in Barnes and Nobles and then ship them, package them pretty, ship them to the clients. And it was just so much work. And I'm like, why doesn't this exist? And then, it dawned on me at the end of last year, well, maybe I am the one who's supposed to bring that into the world. I don't know if you know Elizabeth Gilbert's writing. She wrote this book called Big Magic. She's known for Eat, Pray, Love, which is amazing. Right. But one of my favorite books of all time I've ever read is Big Magic. It talks about the relationship with our creativity and how to tap more into that. And it describes like ideas as this like separate entities that live in the world of their own. They're just kind of floating in space. And we humans are like little antennas, like little channelers. And so the idea finds us and it kind of tries to knock at around us and say, hey, are you listening? I'm still here. And so eventually it gets bored and it leaves. And then that's how sometimes, when the Wright brothers flew the first plane, there were like 6 or 7 other people building an airplane all at the same time, all across the world. So ideas are not super unique to one person. They're just free-floating entities. And so my point is, You Should Read has been following me for such a long time. And I kept saying, I don't have time. I'm too busy. I'm on this journey. Like, go away, go away. And then last year, I was ready to take a break. And I remember the first week I sat down, I rented a beautiful little place on a hill in Monterey, California, overlooking the Pacific Ocean, the Monterey Bay. And it was like new moon. It was so dark. And I remember sitting, meditating before bedtime. And it just came to me. The idea came to me again. And it was like, well, you have time now. What's your excuse? And so I started You Should Read as a 30-day challenge on Instagram. Every day I would do one thing for the business. And I never thought I would actually finish, but it picked up like the investments my friends started to have into the idea, the amount of like camaraderie again that came from the community that kept encouraging me to keep going, solve through all these problems. Like, how do I get the packaging and how do I buy these books at a wholesale? You know, I figured it all out one step at a time. And then at the end of that year, when my lease was up, I had two directions. I could just like leave it and carry on with my life, go back on the road and forget all about it. Or I could trust that this path was meant to be the path I'm walking for the, you know, near future. And so I drove cross country to Florida, got a place here, and I'm still seeing that through. Yeah, that's how it started.
Well, it's so beautiful. And I remember some of those stories from Monterey and a coyote that was just all the different stories.
Yeah.
So I know we've been spending so much lovely time together that we could be forever and ever. What I wanted to do is remind people where we can find you. And I know that you've got hashtags, many soulful smiles.
Miles. Miles.
Is it miles or smiles?
Miles, many soulful miles.
That's so funny. I see it as smiles.
Oh, really?
That's how my brain is interpreting it.
Oh.
So either way, beautiful. That's so
Thank
funny.
you. Yeah.
And so that now your books are part of a whole gifting, and you have curated other gifts and as part of rituals, and tell us more of how the vision has expanded, and then where people can find you.
Yeah,
how
thank
to
you
do
for
this.
asking.
Yeah.
Sure. So the idea is very simple. Books should not just be like an afterthought. They make great gifts, but it's boring to just give the books. So what I'm trying to build is an opportunity for people to create a conscious and intentional gift, with the book being the main item. So I'm starting with just the bestsellers, nonfiction bestsellers that are specifically oriented at personal development, you know, have beautiful stories like memoirs in them, something that people can read and be better because they read it. So that's where I'm starting with the books. And then I'm also very much a fan of artisanal gifting. Anybody who's a maker who creates something from a place of heart, I love that person. And so I wanted all the gifting and the pairing to be sourced from those origins. And so now the service you should read box.com is where you can find it. It pairs those nonfiction, best-selling books with the gifts in the beautiful, like thoughtful packaging. You can I'll handwrite your card. You can leave a cute message for somebody. And then I ship it for you in the click of a button to the house, you know, the address that you put in, and that person gets this beautiful gift that's curated for them. And so that's the idea I have, is I think that, again, going back to where we started this conversation, we are in a world that is so materialistic and disconnected from like that source, right? Mm-hmm. And we are all like just lost. And I think books are, for me, they've been mentors and guides for me. And so are stories of other people. And I think there's like the wisdom of the whole world is contained in these pages. And so I think people should gift more books. So I'm just the messenger and facilitator for how to make that more meaningful, more wholesome, more special, and to evoke a sense of awe and, you know, a magic when you receive that at your doorstep and you don't know what it is. And it just says, you should read. And I think I don't know if this is something that the world necessarily needs, but I'm finding more and more people every day who are aligned with my vision and are interested in this. So I have, you know, you can build your own box, or you can we have a monthly subscription where I curate one book of the month. That's a brand new bestseller that just came out in the last couple of months. And then I pair it with like the specific pairings that enhance the reading experience of that book and the theme of that book. So you can get that as well, and just get a little self-care box delivered to your doorstep once a month. And our channels are all You Should Read Box, at You Should Read Box. And the website is youshouldreadbox.com. That's it. So simple.
Yulia, you know what? I love, you just put the little cherry on top. It's so simple. So we've been down the river in this whole conversation with many twists and turns, but it comes back to the same thing of the simplicity. And sometimes especially it's this summertime here in North America, or it's winter's day on the other side of the world, but to curl up for a few moments. And sometimes do you send candles or just light a candle? You were talking about ritual. Create this little simple moment. And whether it's even just a page or two, just read or do something outside or play some music. The simplicity of our lives is really what's calling us. I think that's a universal calling right now.
Beautiful.
For all of us in this chaotic time. Just find something simple that brings you joy, brings you back to center, and the gifts from somebody's heart to yours. That's the music, because we can buy anything. We have all the different platforms to buy all the things, but where have we created and curated from other heart to heart to heart to then land as a gift for you, right? This is the magic of what you're doing.
Yeah. And I know, to add to that, let's take it back to community, because the thing is, everybody wants to read more. Everybody I talk to, I wish I had more time to read, right? But why is nobody doing that? It's because our lives are so busy. So yes, it does take deliberate intention to like make space for reading and to have like that moment, that precious moment where you get to curl up on your couch and make space for it. But I'm trying to also see if there's a community context around reading. One of the things I'm bringing into Palm Beach is in-person events where for an hour we gather and we bring our own books and we just read together. So we don't actually talk much. We'll have a little breakout circle at the end where you can share something. You don't even have to share what you read. You just share how your day's going, anything that's on your mind. And it's a collective experience, but it's very personal. Like you come in your own safe little bubble, but you have all this other bubbles of other people around you. And I think there's magic in that too. So if, I'm seeing if there's a need for this. I'm trying to see if there's, because for me, my boyfriend and I read a lot. We sometimes read on a couch on a Saturday or Sunday, just next to each other. I'll have my feet on him, and he'll read his book, I'll read mine. And it's blissful. It's so nice to be able to like passively or like connect in this way. So I'm trying to see, these events and activations, if there's potential for another community to be birthed from that attracts people who want to learn, who want to read, who want to make space, but never find the space. So this is a container for them to come and be a part of something that allows them to fulfill that need of theirs.
I love it. I love it so much. And I call that hum, where you're just together with somebody. You're each doing your own thing, but that hum that's happening. I find that in libraries, actually. There's a hum in there. And so what you're starting to create is that little individual experiences within the same hive, right? Which is different than a typical book club per se. But anyway, Yulia, I know we could go on down the river all day long, but thank you once again. And we will put all of Yulia's information in the show notes, and find her and read some books. And I appreciate you so, so much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of my stories and to, just be so vulnerable on your show. I haven't done that in a while. So this was scary for me, but I'm grateful for the opportunity and I'm glad I did it. I feel like we, just the connection you and I shared, it felt so wholesome. I hope other people can find that same energy in it too. So thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you. I love you so much. Thank you for listening, everybody. Please be sure to like, follow, review, and share this episode and all the others, because this notion of community and sharing what is important to each of us, that's my calling. That's my calling, is to say it loud and proud. So thanks again. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.